Do you crave exciting sports takes and news? Fed up with the same old boring voices you hear on the radio? If you answered yes to any of these questions, you just might be a TBloomaholic. Lucky for you, it's time for another episode of the TBloom Talk Show, the #1 sports podcast in the world. Settle in, my TBloomanites, because another episode starts right now. Live from TBloom headquarters, here's your host, TBloom.
Good, everyone? All right, nation! Welcome back, another episode of the TBloom Talk Show. Of course, I'm your host, TBloom himself. Today, we will be without Sir Charles. That's okay, though. The show must go on. Sir Charles is not able to make it with us today. But yeah, the show must go on. We got a whole week 5, every game to go over. I'll give you my Player of the Game awards, and I'll give you the AFC and NFC Player of the Week at the end of the episode. Remember, if you're not already doing so, go ahead and like, subscribe, comment, and tell a friend to tell a friend, man. Let's get those subscriptions up. I'm at 128 right now. Let's get it to 130 before this Friday's episode. I think that's pretty manageable, don't you think? I mean, I'm not asking for much here. You guys tune in every week. I think, bump up the numbers. It's not only going to help me, it's going to help you. Being one of the first subscribers to an absolutely freaking national talk show, podcast, whatever you want to call it, is just going to make your life easier. With that being said, we got a lot of games to go over. Let's just get into it right now. We're going to start off with that Thursday night game. I know it's been a little bit of time, almost a week since it's happened, so we'll just briefly touch on it. I want to give you my opinion on who I think the player of the game was, and I think you guys already know where I'm leaning with that. Of course, we're talking about the Bears versus the Commanders. The Bears would win 40-20 to pick up their first win. The Commanders fall to 2-3. Chicago is now 1-4. Chicago will take on the 1-4 Vikings next week on the road, and the Commanders will be headed to Atlanta against the 3-2 Atlanta Falcons. Now, obviously, I think you guys know who the player of the game in this one is. It has to be DJ Moore. Hasn't had the season that he was looking for early on in this season, right, with the Chicago Bears and Justin Fields. However, this game was the absolute, it was everything and more that you would ever expect DJ Moore to do in a game. 8 receptions, 230 yards, and 3 TDs, including the game sealer there at the end with about a minute or so left. Absolutely phenomenal performance by DJ Moore. If you were unlucky like me going against him in fantasy, your fantasy day was pretty much done that Thursday night. I mean, it's hard to come back from a 50-point deficit off one guy on someone's roster. So kudos to DJ Moore. Kudos to the Chicago Bears for picking up their first win. We'll see if this kind of starts as a snowball effect. Hopefully for you Chicago Bears fans out there, a snowball effect to get something going, get a couple of these wins going. They got the Vikings next week, who on paper is probably a better team, but they're not playing like it. And not to mention, we got some news. Justin Jefferson will be out for a couple weeks at least. He's got a hamstring issue he's dealing with. They just put him on IR, so actually he's going to be out for a guaranteed 4 more weeks. So sad news for the Vikings there. We'll touch on that in a little bit as we get more towards their game. But shout out to the Bears and DJ Moore for your player of the game. Next game, we're going to move to the London game starting on Sunday. It was the Jaguars versus the Bills. The Jaguars would pull this out 25-20 to move them to 3-2 and move the Bills to 3-2. The Jaguars, man, they took advantage of being over in London for about 2 weeks now. They looked like the team that was ready to go, was used to the environment, and was firing on all cylinders, especially early. Now, did they play a very clean game? Not at all. Trevor Lawrence had a couple of mistakes. Couple plays where I know he's wishing that he would have got back to make it a little easier of a victory, but you can't sit here and say that the Bills weren't affected by the time distance and the time zone that they have in England as compared to Buffalo. They fly in on Friday. They only get about a day or so to really recover and get adjusted to the time zone, and that could take a big effect on players, coaches, just the rhythm, the routine that you're used to in the NFL. It takes a huge effect on it. Not to mention, a lot of these players were saying that the turf felt like concrete damn near. And there's already been speculation and concern by players and other people around the league that the fields need to just go green. They just need to be all grass. They need to get rid of the whole turf thing because it's just terrible for players on their bodies. And it definitely adds to an increase of injuries throughout the season because it's just not a good surface to play on. So a lot of topics going on with that. But in due part, the Jaguars won because of Travis Etienne's effort. 26 carries, 136 yards, and 2 TDs. For you fantasy owners out there that have been patient like me, you love to see that. He got me 36 points roughly in my ESPN PPR league, and you got to be happy to see it. He is the player of the game for this one. He pretty much dominated from start to finish. Travis Etienne, shout out to him. Shout out to everyone who stuck with him, you fantasy owners out there. With that being said, Jaguars move to 3-2. They will go home and face the Indianapolis Colts for a division showdown, and the Buffalo Bills will be moving on back to Buffalo at home to face the 1-4 Giants. They look to get back on track with an easy one right there on Sunday Night Football. Next game, we got the Houston Texans versus the Atlanta Falcons. Houston would win, or the Falcons would win 21-19, as the Falcons now move to 3-2 and the Texans to 2-3. Now, last week, you look back, the Texans absolutely massacred my Pittsburgh Steelers in crazy fashion, and it looked like this could be a team that, could run through anybody. Unfortunately, Pittsburgh Steelers love to play down to their competition, so it didn't really say much to do that against Pittsburgh because that's just what we do. We like to fuck up. We like to fuck ourselves, and that was a case of that. The Atlanta Falcons came in at home and showed why they are still a force to be reckoned with. Desmond Ridder with his best game of his career, 329 yards and a TD. The guy stepped up when he needed to. He played well. He made some throws that looked like legitimate NFL top 15 quarterback throws. Not to mention the guy can do it with his legs as well. I think Desmond Ridder is a very, very underrated quarterback, at least so far. He's taken advantage of his receivers, such as Drake London. Kyle Pitts is even getting more involved. He had 7 receptions and 87 yards, one of his better days that he's had since he came into the league. And not to mention they didn't get the running game going super well this game. The Texans did a good job bottling them up there, but they did, however, break open a few big ones and have some runs over 10 yards that is going to help them overall as they move on throughout the season. Their defense also played very well, holding the Texans to just 19 points and only giving up a touchdown in the fourth quarter. So shout out to the defense as well. This Falcons team looks to be heading in pretty strong, especially in terms of the push for the AFC South. You can't really say that there's a team out there in the AFC South that looks better than them. I mean, I know we got the Saints over there at 3-2. They've kind of had an up and down year. They just blew out the Patriots, which we'll get to here in a second. But you got to think this Falcons team has just as big of a chance as anybody else in this division to win, and maybe the best chance. They're pretty well rounded, and they got a new culture. I like it. I think they're the front runners, personally, for me. Maybe New Orleans, but I just like the Falcons a little bit more because I think they're just a little bit more hungry, a little bit more well-rounded, and I think they can get the job done. So, yes, the Falcons would then move to 3-2. Texans would move to 2-3. Texans go back home. They will face the New Orleans Saints, who sit at 3-2 as well, coming off that dub against the Patriots, and the Falcons now move on back at home against the Washington Commanders, as we just said, trying to keep their momentum going. But you know the Washington Commanders are going to be really, really pumped to come and get another win back because they just lost to the Chicago Bears. And, oh, that's right, player of the game for this one, I'm going Young-Ho Koo. He kicked the game-winning field goal. Not many times you can give a kicker, or legitimately can give a kicker, the player of the game. But we're going Young-Ho Koo for the player of the game in the Falcons versus the Texans. Next game, we got the Panthers versus the Lions. The Lions would come out and win 42-24 and move to 4-1. And the Panthers now sit at 0-5 on the season. Man, I mean, as good as they have been playing, the Panthers, it sucks to see them at 0-5. I think there's worse teams out there with better records, but it's definitely a tough start for Bryce Young in his young career as a quarterback in the league in terms of the winning percentage. But this Lions team is next level. They've completely turned around their culture. Dan Campbell's done a good job of doing that, and this isn't something we didn't see coming. We saw this coming last year when they had a freaking chance to make it to the playoffs, and they had a big run last year. And it's kind of cool to see that it's all coming in to how they thought it would play out. Many times there's these teams that get hyped up in the offseason because they had a good end of the last year, and they kind of fall short of their expectations. The Detroit Lions are not one of those teams. They're a team that have came in, met expectations, and even exceeded some of the expectations that were put on them. This team can do everything. They can run the ball. They can pass the ball. Jared Goff is playing just as well as any other quarterback in the league right now. Not to mention they can play some goddamn defense. That's what was killing them last year. They were giving up so many points. They were getting to these big shootouts. Their offense could keep up for only so long. And then you can't lose. You can't be a successful team being a shootout team. They have a good defense. They have a great coach, a great system. They're putting it all together right now. So kudos to the Detroit Lions as they move to 4-1. And I'm gonna have to give the player of the game to Jared Goff. Jared Goff, he came in, he threw 4 TDs, led this team. He's the whole show on offense. Everything runs through Jared Goff. I know this running game's doing real big things. Dave Montgomery's playing out of his mind. They still got the rookie Gibbs, and they're doing good. But, I mean, what Jared Goff is doing, this team isn't as successful if they don't have Jared Goff at the helm. And he showed that, and he proves that every week. And he did it again this week with 4 TDs. So shout out to Jared Goff, Dan Campbell, and the Detroit boys over there in Detroit. They're buzzing around. I know the city's going crazy. The city needs anything they can right now. Let's be honest. Detroit's a mess, but their football team ain't no more. Moving on. The Colts will be going against the Jaguars next week on the road at 3-2 in the the Lions will be moving on, facing the Tampa Bay Bucks on the road in Tampa. The Tampa Bay Bucks are 3-1 coming off that bye. That should be a good one. Tampa is no joke. They're playing well, and they're going to be just as hungry to win this game. On the other hand, the Panthers looking for their first win. They're going to have their work cut out for them next week as they have to travel to Miami against the 4-1 Dolphins, who are one of the hottest teams in the league. So we'll see. Good luck with that one, Carolina. You guys got a lot of work to do. Next game, we got the Titans versus the Colts. The Colts would win it and break that streak of 5 years. That's it. 5 years of not being able to beat Tennessee at home has been broke. They won 23-16 on Sunday. They moved to 3-2. The Titans now moved to 2-3. And man, what a show it was for Zach Moss and this running game. I mean, Zach Moss, we heard the big stories of what's his name? Can't believe I'm forgetting his name. That's how long he's been out the freaking league. That's how irrelevant he seems now. The running back that just signed the big Jonathan Taylor. There we go. Jonathan Taylor, we know he just got signed to that big contract. We didn't expect him to get a full workload by any means, but we didn't expect Zach Moss to come out and run 23 carries for 165 yards and 2 TDs either. The man's a beast. He's taken as much advantage of his opportunity that he has here in Indy as he possibly can, and this is going to be a crazy 1-2 punch come the late offseason. As you know, days get colder, nights get longer, days are colder. You got to be able to run the ball come late months in this league if you're going to want to be successful in the playoffs, if you're going to want to have a chance to even make the playoffs, and this team's shown that they can do that just now. Some bad news, though. Anthony Richardson is likely to miss at least a month of football with a torn level 3 torn shoulder. It's not looking good for the young rookie's early career. Maybe he'll start sliding more. The guy took a bad, nasty. It didn't even look like one of the worst hits that he's took. But it was a bad enough hit to where he tore his shoulder, and he will be out indefinitely for at least a month. On the bright side, though, the Indianapolis Colts do have a little guy named Gardner Minshew who's ready to come in and sling that thing around with the best of them at any given Sunday. So you got some optimism there. Now, what happens if Gardner Minshew takes this team and they don't lose? What happens if the Indianapolis Colts don't lose all the way up until Anthony Richardson is ready to go? When he's healthy, when he's ready to go, do you bring back in Anthony Richardson or do you let the freaking Minshew mania fly? Because I tell you what, right now, when Minshew mania is buzzing and that whole hashtag gets going, it's hard to stop. Minshew's he's got a crowd. He's got a fan base. He's already got stuff implemented, not only there in Indianapolis, but across the whole league. And if he's coming out winning games, how are you going to justify benching him just because your rookie quarterback comes back with a torn shoulder? Who knows how he's going to be able to throw after that? It's not like it's his left shoulder. It's his throwing shoulder. So it's going to be interesting just to see how this all plays out. Let's just take a look at Indianapolis's schedule for the next 5 weeks. Next week, of course, they got the Jaguars. They could very well beat the Jaguars. I mean, anytime it's a division game, anybody can win. So let's say they play the Jaguars really well, and they beat them next week. Then they got the Browns. The Browns are the Browns. Let's just put it that way. The Browns are a very beatable team. Very beatable team. Then you got the Saints, also a very beatable team. Although I know they just blew out the New England Patriots, but the Patriots got problems in their own right. And the Saints, they're not always showing up to play ball. Then after the Saints, they got the Panthers, 0-5, very winnable game. Then they got the Patriots. We just talked about how bad they were. So, I mean, I won't put it past the Colts to rattle off a 4-5 game win streak and have a complete disastrous situation of what the fuck do we do when Anthony Richardson comes back? Because that's kind of looking like what it's going to be leaning towards. Because I don't think Gardner Minshew's going to play bad at all. In fact, I think he's going to play very well, especially with this run game, and especially as the weeks go on. He's going to get more momentum. He's going to get more, success with his receivers. He's going to build up more, what's the word I'm looking for? Build up more rapport with his receivers. They're going to be on the same page more, and I think he's just going to look better and better as the weeks go on. Indianapolis, you guys got a good problem on your hands. With that being said, Indianapolis moves to 3-2. They got the Jags next week. As we said, the Titans go to Baltimore or go back home and they face Baltimore 3-2, and we will see what happens then for the Titans, because the Titans are in a tough, tricky situation right now, man. I mean, they really needed to get that dub. They really did, and they didn't. So, what's next for the Titans? Who knows? Next game, the Giants versus the Dolphins. Dolphins would steamroll past the Giants 31-16. The Giants now 1-4 in a complete, absolute disaster to open up the first 5 weeks of the season for the New York Giants. We've seen all the optimism coming in from the offseason about Daniel Jones getting that contract and him being the future. They never really upgraded anything at receiver, so I don't know what they were thinking in terms of that. I know they went out and got that rookie, Hewitt, I think his name is. Not even a big-time receiver at all, and they expected to be better passing the ball. I know they got Darren Waller. They haven't been using him very well. Their O-line stinks. I mean, it's just a complete disaster. They're nothing like what we thought they were going to be coming into the season, and they look like that same Giants team that got shit-swamped against the Eagles last year in the playoffs and looked like a complete mess, looked like a complete travesty of a playoff team, looked like they didn't deserve a damn second under those bright lights in that stadium that day, that night, and they continued it throughout this season. So they moved to 1-4. The Dolphins moved to 4-1, and the Dolphins just dolphined this game, right? They were just the whole fucking way, and then the Giants, they were just fee-fi-fo thumbing up their butt, and they didn't know what the fuck was going on the whole time. It was a complete mess. You could see it coming a mile away. I didn't touch this game in terms of watching it. I knew what was going to happen. It did look interesting at a point. I believe it got to 13-10 because of a New York Giants pick six. And it looked promising. Maybe they can come back, make it a ball game. Absolutely wrong. Not to mention Daniel Jones would get hurt by the end of this game. I'm going to go ahead and give the player of the game, well, more likely the players of the game, will be the Dolphins' defensive line with 7 sacks. They absolutely massacred Daniel Jones. Like I said, he got hurt eventually, but 7 sacks on the day. Dolphins D-line was going bananas. So shout out to the Dolphins D-line. Shout out to the Dolphins coming in and taking care of business and not making it a close one, or at least not making it a heart thumper there at the end. They're doing what they need to do against the teams they need to do it against. Carolina will be the next Dolphins opponent. Dolphins are going back home. They should take care of business with that. The Dolphins should be moving on to a 5-0 start. I mean, and they're 2-0 at home. They should be moving on to 3-0 at home next week going against Carolina. Giants, they got their work cut out for them. They got to play the damn Bills at home on Sunday night after the Bills just got beat by the Jags. They're not happy about it. man, this Giants team's depressing, and it sucks that they got them on so many freaking primetime games, and we got to sit there and we got to watch this travesty of a team play under the lights after their performances. It's honestly remarkable. I think the NFL should start being able to flex games as soon as week 5. Why not? Like, why does it take so long to realize the who's who of the league? I mean, we know the Giants aren't shit with Daniel Jones, not to mention that they got the fucking Tyrod Taylor's going to have to come in and play. I mean, it's not like he's a bad quarterback, but he ain't going to save the Giants. I just don't get it. I think the NFL should start recognizing bad games and start putting in good games right as soon as they can. I don't get what the whole holdup is. I don't know. If you know, let me know in the comments right now. Let TBloom in on a little secret. Anyway, moving on. Next game, we got the Saints versus the Patriots. The massacre in New England. To lose 34-0 in New England under Bill Belichick. This is the first time that we were realistically thinking that Belichick should be considered on his last straw with the Patriots. You can't lose 34-0, go fucking... I mean, it's just bad. It's just bad all over. There's really nowhere you can even start with the Patriots. From Mac Jones to the defense to the coaching, it just looks bad all over. I've never seen a Bill Belichick-led team look so bad, especially after coming off a complete disaster the last week. I thought this was a game that was a layup. They were laying it up for New England to slam dunk it on the Saints and get back to track. No, that's not what happened at all. Patriots moved to 0-3 at home. That is, for a team that has so much success in their home stadium at Foxborough, to be 0-3 at home, on week 5 of the season, it's absolutely nuts. It is absolutely nuts, and it's the end of an era, so to speak. But the Patriots would move to 1-4. The Saints would move to 3-2. Derek Carr, 183 yards, 2 TDs. Alvin Kamara, 22 carries, 80 yards, 1 TD. Michael Thomas, 4 receptions, 65 yards. I mean, nothing really special by this offense by any means, but they were just able to handle it. And I got to tell you, the player of the game for the Saints, it has to be Mac Jones. I mean, here's a guy that came out, threw a pick 6 for him, threw 2 interceptions, and then had a fumble lost on top of that. Mac Jones did everything he possibly could to give the New Orleans Saints an advantage in this one, and he did a great job of that. So shout out Mac Jones for helping the New Orleans Saints team massacre the New England Patriots in New England. Sorry, Justin. Next game, we got the Ravens versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. I hate to say I told you so, but god damn it. I mean, you see it, baby. I told you so. Don't let these Pittsburgh blowouts fool you. We play terrible. We play so far down the competition. Sometimes we try to go beneath them. We try to beat them at being the worst. Hence the Houston Texans. No, they're not the worst team in the league. Don't get me wrong. CJ Stroud's doing his thing. But I think the Steelers should have won that game if we're putting roster to roster. We got a fucking better team than they do, especially with our defense. We got shit swamped. People were thinking coming into this Ravens game, oh my God, look at Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. They're coming off a great game. They got it all together. The pieces are moving. It's flowing. This is not what you think it is. This is AFC North football. This is Steelers versus Ravens, the greatest rivalry in sports right now. You're not going to get a blowout game. The Steelers would win 17-10 after losing and trailing all game long until the fourth quarter, the very end of it. Kenny Pickett to George Pickens for a 40-yard touchdown against Marlon Humphreys. You couldn't write this script any better. And this is Pittsburgh Steelers football. Let's go all the way down to the end and finally win it in the end. And if you look back in your past, and if you did your research, you'd understand how much Lamar Jackson struggles against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think he's beat us maybe one time in his whole career. He hasn't played us every single time due to injuries and stuff like that. But even when he does, he plays terrible. And he played really good this game. I'm not going to lie, the Ravens, they should have probably won this game, but they didn't. A lot of drops on the offensive side of the ball for the Ravens. Nelson Aguilar dropped a pretty much walk-in touchdown in the late third quarter. You had Zay Flowers dropping some balls in space. It was a messy game for this Baltimore's receiving crew. But Lamar Jackson also gave up a game-costly fumble recovery and a game-costly interception in the fourth quarter and blew the game essentially for him. Now, obviously, he had his good moments, but Lamar Jackson, through and through, doesn't play this Pittsburgh Steelers defense very well at all. He's been pretty much unsuccessful throughout his whole career against this defense, and for that reason, he struggled again against the Steelers defense, and the Steelers would move to 3-2 and take the number 1 spot in the AFC North, and the Ravens would also move to 3-2. Ravens, they got Tennessee next week on the road. That should be a pretty decent game. I think they get back on track with that one, but the Steelers move into the bye week, a very early bye week for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like to see it more in the week 9 area, middle of the season, middle of the pack, but we'll take it. We'll get healthy. Deontay Johnson should be back week 7. We'll get Freiermuth back, and each week that goes on, Cameron Hayward should be closing in on a week 10, week 11 comeback. So, yeah, I think things are looking on the up and up for Pittsburgh. They got L.A. when they come back from that bye. We'll see how they do. They got their work cut out there. George Pickens with one of the best games of his career, 6 receptions, 130 yards, and a TD. But the player of the game goes to no one other but Alex Highsmith. This guy, 11 pressures throughout the whole game and had the game-sealing strip sack fumble on Lamar Jackson. And for that reason, Mr. Alex Highsmith, you are the player of the game. Next game, we got the Eagles versus the LA Rams. Man, this LA Rams team is a scary team. I'll tell you what, Cooper Kupp coming back is going to fuck up a lot of teams. I'm telling you that right now. Between Puka and Cooper and Matthew Stafford being still an elite gunslinger, they can beat any team any week. I don't care who you are. They just need a couple good big plays from this Rams defense, and they can make it happen. And it almost happened against the Eagles this week. Although they came up short, the Eagles would win 23-14. Jalen Hurts, 303 yards, 1 TD, 1 interception. He'd also have 15 carries for 72 yards and a TD. A.J. Brown, 6 receptions, 127 yards. And yeah, I think the story of this game, I'm going to give the player or the players of the game to the Eagles offensive line. There was about, I counted at least 4, maybe 5 tush pushes or the brotherly shove, whatever you want to call it. I like the brotherly shove. I think that's a better name. It's a little bit more mature of a nickname than the tush push. Put in the comments right now, do you guys prefer this play to be the tush push or the brotherly shove? Let me know in the comments. But yeah, the Eagles O-line absolutely dominated. Jalen Hurts only got sacked 1 time, and I think it's because he held on to the ball and tried to make a play. But, I mean, this offensive line held their own, especially against Aaron Donald. They didn't really give up anything to him. The whole tush-push, brotherly shove thing is literally created by this offensive line, and there was about 4 or 5 times where they needed to get a first down or they needed a touchdown on 4th down. They went to the brotherly shove, and this offensive line continues to be successful. They're at a 92% rate with that play. And speaking on which, whether they should ban it, until other teams can replicate this success that the Eagles are having at 92%, at a 92% clip, until another team can show that they can do it as successfully and it becomes widespread OP across the league, then they shouldn't ban shit. This is a play. They clearly know a recipe for it. They brought in, who's their lineman guy? I probably couldn't even pronounce his name, but he's a rugby player, former rugby player. He's used to scrums, man. I mean, that's what rugby is. It's pretty much essentially that play. They know what they're doing. No other team's doing it as well, and for that reason, I don't think that they should outlaw it until other teams can do it just as well. The Eagles would go ahead and move on to 5-0, still undefeated, and the Rams now move to 2-3, but a nasty 2-3. Like I said, Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, if they can just get this defense a little bit under wraps, I think this team could potentially make the playoffs because they're just as good as any other wild card team in the NFC out there, trust me. Rams would go on next week. They'll face Arizona back at home for them. The Eagles go on the road to New York against the Jets, who are now 2-3 coming off a win for themselves, which we will go over in just a sec. Next game, the Bengals versus the Cardinals. Well, the Bengals look to be back. They would win this game 34-20. They move to 2-3, and the Cardinals now drop to just 1-4. Joe Burrow coming back coming back and having a day, his best day of the year. He's got 317 yards, a TD, and an interception. Although he had a hell of a day, guess what? He wasn't the star of the show. Mr. Jamar Chase, 15 receptions, 192 yards, and 1 TD. Guys, he called his shot. Last week he was upset, wasn't getting as many targets as he wanted to, wasn't getting the push that he wanted to. Said, hey, guess what? I'm always fucking open. You're goddamn right you were. In fact, you're open 15 times for 15 different receptions, and suddenly the Cincinnati Bengals look to be back and rolling, and I'll tell you, they didn't pick a better time to do it than now, because if you look at their upcoming schedule, they got a lot of games that can go a lot of ways, and if they're not playing at their absolute best, this is a team that could very easily, and I'm not joking by any means, they can miss the playoffs because of their absolute terrible start so far this season. If you look at the remaining parts of their schedule, they got the Seahawks next week. Seahawks, although I hate them, they play very tough football, and it's not necessarily a game that you can just go and put up your half. You can't put up half of your. God damn it! What fucking am I looking for? You can't play shitty football and expect to just beat the fucking Seahawks like that. Now, they got the 49ers right after that. They'll probably lose that game. Then they got the Bills. That's a tough game. They got the Texans. They're playing a little tough. I'm not too worried about those. But then they got to play the Ravens. They got to play the Steelers. They got to play the Jaguars, the Colts, the Steelers again, the Chiefs, and the Browns. They got division games. They got tough games. They got everything out the end. So a game that they absolutely needed to win, they did win against the Cardinals. They better have it rolling, man. And I know Joe Burrow looked a little bit more mobile in the game last week. That's a good sign for you Bengals fans. But yeah, I mean, it's gonna be clinchers. It's gonna be tight games for the foreseeable future for these Bengals fans and this Bengals team. But they were able to get the job done against the Cardinals, 34-20. Cardinals now moved to 1-4. They got the LA Rams on the road next week. As we stated before, the Bengals will play the Seattle Seahawks at home. Seahawks are 3-1, coming off a bye. Player of the game is obviously Jamar Chase. 15 receptions, 192 yards, and 3 tugs. Welcome back. Next game, you got the Jets versus the Broncos. Both of these teams are in a tough spot, but the Jets would win 31-21. And man, oh man, this Broncos team is looking bad. I mean, I think that game really clinched the fact that they are not going to make the playoffs. 1-4, everything that could go wrong for this team has gone wrong. If we take a look at their remaining schedule, it's not looking very good at all for them. I'll tell you that right now, especially after losing to the Jets without Aaron Rodgers. So the remaining schedule for the Denver Broncos, next week they got the Chiefs. That's probably going to be a loss. Travis Kelce's questionable. We'll see how that goes. But, I mean, even then, it's going to be hard to beat the Chiefs in Arrowhead on Thursday night on a short week. Then they got to play the Packers. Okay, they can manage that. Then they got to play the Chiefs again, then the Bills, then the Browns, and then the Chargers and the Lions, Chargers again. So this is an AFC that you need at least 10 wins to guarantee yourself a wild card. Now maybe it falls to where you can get 9 wins and maybe a tie in there and sneak your way in that way. But to guarantee yourself a decent shot at making this wild card in the AFC, you need 10 wins. And they're already down to 4 losses. That means they can only afford about 3 more losses, and they got 2 games where they got to play the Chiefs. So that means they're going to have to beat the Chiefs once. I just don't think they're going to be able to do it. I think the Broncos just lost their chances at a playoff berth last week, or by losing to the Jets this week. I think it's over. The Sean Payton wasn't the answer. I don't know. Maybe he's part of the problem. Russell Wilson, he's playing a lot better than he did last year, but it's still not enough. He would give up a costly fumble 6 with about 30 seconds left in the game-winning drive that he was potentially going to put the Denver Broncos in position to score. They still had a long way to go, but man, to end the game on a fumble 6 like that is absolutely devastating, and this Bronco fan base cannot be any more pissed off, I'm sure. So, sorry, Denver. It sucks. You got KC next week, and the Jets. I mean, here's a little situation with the Jets. Let's say the Jets start getting it together on offense, and Zach Wilson starts piecing things together. And if the Jets are even going to make the playoffs, like we just mentioned, they need at least 10 wins. They only got 2 right now. They're at 3 losses. That means they can only afford about 7 more losses. Or no, That means they can only afford about 4 more losses. Now, if we take a look at their remaining schedule, they don't got stuff easy either. They got to play the Eagles next week. Then they got to play the Chargers in 2 weeks. Then in a couple weeks from there, they got to play the Bills. Then after that, they got to play the Dolphins. Oh, and guess what? They got to play the Dolphins again. And then they got to play the Browns, who are probably going to be fighting for a playoff spot. So they're going to play a lot of teams that are going to be in the hunt, and they're going to have to win a lot of close games. Now, hypothetically speaking, let's say they were to put it together. They were to get to 10 wins. The only way that this team is going to get to 10 wins is if Zach Wilson starts playing better than he has and starts putting it together, starts maybe hitting a touchdown every game or putting up 200 yards passing, or at least makes this offense look fluid and have some sort of sustainability in games, in drives. Point being, Zach Wilson's going to have to be playing at a level. Here's what he's capable of. He's going to have to be playing at this level. Now, do you really want to bring in an Aaron Rodgers? Do you really want to bring an Aaron Rodgers into that playoff game if he's healthy and he's ready to go? A guy who hasn't played all season, hasn't had as many snaps with the offense, with his receivers, with the whole deal, hasn't been through the same amount of games as a guy like Zach Wilson would be playing at if they were to hit 10 games? Does this make sense for you? Why would you want to bring in a guy who's coming off an ACL tear, regardless of his, analytics, and he's Aaron Rodgers? I get that. I get that whole thing, but there's something to be said with chemistry and being ready come playoff time. And Aaron Rodgers is not going to be playoff ready after sitting out, maintaining a Achilles injury for the last 2 months or whatever the timeline may be. He's not going to be able to play good ball. So why would you even let him come in and start over Zach Wilson? Well, if you guys have 10 wins, he's probably got some momentum going. Your offense has an identity. They have a little bit of a sense of what they are. You can't get rid of that. You can't just throw in Aaron Rodgers and expect him to be the same Aaron Rodgers or the same team that they would have been with Aaron Rodgers if Aaron had been playing all through the season. It doesn't work like that. I say shut down Aaron Rodgers for the whole season, really revamp his Achilles, really go through a good process and a good program for his Achilles to be ready by next year. It's not like Zach Wilson's going to be making leaps and bounds enough to even think about not even bringing back Aaron Rodgers next year. I don't like that whole situation of maybe Rodgers plays. Now, if Aaron Rodgers comes back and he plays maybe 3 regular season games and gets those wins and helps win enough to get to the playoff spot, sure, bring him in. But if it's the fucking first week of the playoffs, do not, New York, I repeat, do not just throw him in there because of his name. It will not work out for you. With that being said, the player of the game here, and it's not Breece Hall, who had 22 carries, 177 yards, and a TD. It's actually Greg the Leg Zuerlein with 5 for 5 for field goal range. I mean, he scored pretty much half the damn points for this team. So kudos to Greg the Leg Zuerlein. He is your player of the game for this one. Moving on, we got the Chiefs versus the Vikings. The Vikings would lose 27-20. They fall to 1-4. Chiefs move to 4-1. Chiefs got the Denver Broncos at home next week. Vikings got the Chicago Bears on the road next week, who are also 1-4. And man, it's not looking good for the Vikings. We just got word this week or today that Justin Jefferson has a hamstring injury. He will be on the injured reserve list for at least 4 weeks. That means he'll be out for 4 weeks. That means Kirk Cousins ain't got his number 1 receiver for 4 weeks. And that means if you got Jordan Addison like I do on fantasy, you may be looking at some big games or maybe some small games because maybe he's going to get doubled now because the defenses know they don't got to guard Jay Jetta. They'll just put fucking 2 on the young rookie Jordan Addison, cover him up. I don't know. Point being, this Vikings team is fucked. They're already thinking about maybe trading Kirk Cousins and shutting down the season. I mean, if you can't get a second round for him, I wouldn't. But, yeah, the Vikings are not looking good. And on the other hand, you got the Chiefs. They pretty much did enough that they had to do to win this game. They didn't have to do anything too special. Travis Kelce did have a scare early in this game. Kind of rolled his ankle a little weird. Non-contact football injury. We know how those go. Not going to go into detail about the significance of those injuries over the years. However, it didn't look good, but he was able to go back into the locker room at half, get it taped, spatzed up, and was able to come back opening second half and pretty much dominate. He went 10 receptions, 67 yards, and a TD, and this offense just looks so much more lethal when he's on the field. It's a shame that the Kansas City Chiefs couldn't grab one fucking at least second string receiver, at least a two receiver this offseason. And they're wasting a year of Patrick Mahomes' talent. I don't mind it. I'm a Steeler fan. We need all the help we can get. But for that reason, because they look so much better with Travis Kelce on the field, Travis Kelce is your game MVP and the player of the game. Moving on, you got the Monday Night Football game, Cowboys versus the 49ers. Man, this is everything I thought it would be. The Cowboys are way overrated. The media loves to hype them up just to bring them down. I think they do it on purpose. I mean, the higher the expectations are on the Dallas Cowboys, the worse they play. This is a game that people thought the Cowboys were going to show the world, the nation, that they deserve to be in the talk of at least a Super Bowl contending team. They are not. They are a regular season diva team who will never be good enough to win a meaningful playoff game as long as Dak Prescott's your quarterback. The guy doesn't show up for big games. 3 interceptions, and all 3 of those interceptions weren't fucking good interceptions. There's a difference between an interception where you throw and it gets tipped off a helmet and someone catches it, but there is a difference between that interception and an interception where you're just fucking dropping back, tossing it up, skying it over your receiver 10 yards, and the safety comes and picks it off. The dude's not even trying. The Cowboys are just not a very good team. They're not a very good team. They're a top 10 team in the league, sure, but they are never going to be a top 5 threat at all by any means. Just not that team. The Niners, they're the best team in the league, best team in football, most well-rounded team in football. Brock Purdy showed out, 252 yards, 4 TDs. He would continue to fucking grow and look like an absolute stud. Now, there is something to be said about this offense. He's surrounded by the best talent in the league. He's surrounded by the best situation any rookie QB in NFL history has ever been put in. Now, does that mean he's absolute trash if he goes somewhere else? No. The guy's got great accuracy, and to be able to be in that offense and be able to run that offense, that's one of the hardest, most difficult offenses in the league, and he's able to run it with complete control, and the poise that he shows on big games speaks volumes. Brock Purdy, player of the game. Cowboys suck. Niners, pretty damn good football team. Cowboys now go to the LA Chargers next week, who are 2-2, coming off that bye. Niners are going to Cleveland, who are 2-2, coming off a bye as well. We will see about what's going to happen with these football teams. I got a feeling that the Cowboys are going to suck, and the Niners are going to probably be a lot better than them. I wonder why I think that. Next game, we got the Packers and Raiders for Monday Night Football. Just happened last week. Packers would lose this one 13-17. Raiders would do just enough to get the win. Jordan Love probably had the worst game of his career. Jimmy G, had the most Jimmy G looking game I've ever seen. 208 yards, a TD, and a pick. But the story of the game today, or for Monday Night Football, was not Jimmy G. It was not this Raiders offense. It was Robert Spillane with 2 interceptions, the former Steeler linebacker. I like to think he was doing that for Pittsburgh, saying, hey, don't you forget about me. We won't, Mr. Spillane. We won't. That is your player of the game for this one. The Packers go on bye next week. The Raiders have to face the Patriots, the struggling Patriots. Josh McDaniels gonna go against his former team, and Bill Belichick and this ruthless, terrible, bad, whatever you want to call it, football team that they call the New England Patriots. So, with that being said, let's move on to your AFC Player of the Week. Guys, I think it's pretty obvious when you think about Player of the Week, you think about someone who obviously deserves it in his stats, but also a guy who just called it. Just absolutely called it. Says, I'm fucking open every time. And guess what? He was for 15 times specifically, at least. Mr. Jamar Chase, 15 receptions, just under 200 yards, 3 TDs. He's back. This Bengal offense looks to be back and rolling. He's your AFC Player of the Week. I don't think there's much debate there. And going on to your NFC TBloom Player of the Week, Mr. DJ Moore, 8 receptions, 202 yards, and 3 TDs as well. It's hard to beat that. It's hard to put up enough stats to be able to beat that out of a wide receiver. The guy put up 50 points on Thursday. For fantasy players out there, it pretty much guaranteed you would either win or lose on Thursday. DJ Moore had a heck of a game, especially after a slow start. Both these players, Jamar Chase and DJ Moore, having a slow start to the season. They picked it up here in Week 5, and for that, they are your Players of the Week for the AFC and the NFC. Guys, I appreciate you tuning in again to the TBloom Talk Show. This is going to wrap up this edition of the TBloom Talk Show. Remember to subscribe, like, leave a comment, and tell a friend to tell a friend. With that being said, I'm your host, TBloom. Thank you for joining me. I will be back Friday for all Week 6 picks, back with Sir Charles and a couple of other lucky special guests. Thank you, guys. I'll see you next time.